الصهيوني.
أشكرك شكرا جزيلا دكتور حاكم بوغرار، يعطيك الصحة. بارك الله فيكم. مستمعينا الأفاضل، نلتقي غدا في أمان الله.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has had telephone conversations with the leaders of several brotherly Arab countries during which they discussed the latest developments and the escalation of military tensions in the Middle East region. Algeria and 7 other member countries of the OPEC Plus have decided to increase their oil production to reach 206,000 barrels per day as from next April, affirming their commitment to adopting a cautious approach in order to maintain market stability. And as tensions remain high in the Gulf region, several countries and organizations have called for moderation and dialogue to avert a new flare-up of violence in the region. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm your host, Mariam Bershi. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has had telephone conversations with the leaders of several brotherly Arab countries during which they discussed the latest developments and the escalation of military tensions in the Middle East region. Ms. Sharfi reports.
The President of the Republic spoke with the Crown Prince of the Brotherly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman. During their conversation, President Tebboune checked on the health and well-being of the Crown's Prince, His Highness Mohammed bin Salman, of His Majesty the King of Custodian of the two holy mosques, and of the Saudi people in light of the challenging circumstances facing the Middle East, and expressed his hope for a rapid restoration of peace and stability in the region. The President also held a phone call with the King of Jordan, his brother Abdullah II, during which they discussed the situation in the region and its impact on the brotherly Jordanian people, wishing for a return to calm and to the restoration of peace in the kingdom and in the entire region. During a similar phone call with the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, President Tebboune discussed developments in the Middle East, expressing his full support for the mediation efforts led by the Emir of Qatar to halt the dangerous escalation in the region, and he hoped peace will be restored rapidly. On the same occasion, the President also held a phone call with the Sultan of Oman, his brother, His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq. They discussed the latest developments in the Middle East. President Tebboune expressed the hope that security, peace and calm would be restored in the region and commended Oman's mediation and the very positive results it has achieved. The President further held a phone call with the Emir of Kuwait, his brother, His Highness Sheikh Mish'al Al-Ahmad Al-Jabir Al-Sabah, during which they discussed the serious security deterioration in the Middle East. On the occasion, the President expressed to the Emir of Kuwait his support for the swift restoration of peace and security that will safeguard restoration in the interests and safety of the brotherly Kuwaiti people.
Instructed by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, and following the serious and rapid developments taking place in the Arabian Gulf region, the Minister of State in charge of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Mr. Ahmed Attab, has received the ambassadors of the Arab countries that have been the target of military attacks amid an escalation of tension in the region at the ministry's headquarters. During the meeting, the minister expressed Algeria's full solidarity with the brotherly Arab countries affected by the military attacks, reaffirming our country's categorical rejection of any violation of the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the brotherly countries and the security of their peoples. In the same context, Mr. Attaf stressed Algeria's constant support for its Arab brothers in the face of the unacceptable violations they have suffered and the resulting of human and material losses. He also reaffirmed Algeria's position, calling for an immediate end to all forms of escalation, as well as for dialogue and restraint in order to spare the region further tensions and avoid the spread of the conflict and its serious repercussions on the regional and international security. Algeria and 7 other member countries of the OPEC Plus have decided to increase their oil production to reach 206,000 barrels per day as from next April, affirming their commitment to adopting a cautious approach in order to maintain market stability. Mr. Sharfi has more details in this report.
The decision was taken during a ministerial coordination meeting held via video conference, bringing together the 8 OPEC Plus member countries and their non-member countries who have agreed on voluntary production cuts since April 2023, namely Algeria, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, the Sultanate of Oman and Russia. A statement issued by the Ministry of Energy and Mines stressed that the decision was taken following in-depth consultations on the short-term outlook of the global oil market in an uncertain but gradually improving economic environment. The OPEC Plus ministers indicated that the current moderation in demand, mainly linked to seasonal factors, is expected to gradually decline, paving the way for a recovery in consumption in the coming months, while reaffirming their commitment to continue consultations and to work in a responsible, coordinated and proactive manner to ensure the stability and balance of the international oil market. It is worth noting that the OPEC Plus ministers will meet again on April 5th to examine the market's conditions, conformity and compensations.
And as tensions remain high in the Gulf region, several countries and organizations have called for moderation and dialogue to avert a new flare-up of violence in the region. They advocated diplomacy to address the volatile situation prevailing in the region in the wake of the U.S.-Israeli joint airstrikes launched against Iranian cities, including the capital Tehran. Asked about the repercussions the military campaign will have on the region, the director of the Arab Political Studies Unit in Cairo, Abdulghani Diab, has the following.
أعتقد أنه إذا استمرت الأمور أطول مما هي عليه الآن.
I believe that if things continue longer than they are now, the results will be catastrophic, especially given the current escalation. I also think that in the coming period, if this war does not stop, there will be further waves of escalation, and maybe other regional parties could be involved in this conflict, either directly or indirectly.
مباشر أو غير مباشر.
This came as the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency called for extreme restraint while expressing concerns at the situation prevailing in the Middle East. And the Israeli occupying forces have arrested at least 44 Palestinians across the occupied West Bank, including 9 children, 1 girl, and a former prisoners, Masoud Sharfi.
The arrest took place in Ramallah and Al-Bira, Tulkarem, Nablus, Kalkilia and Hebron. According to the Prisoners' Information Office, arrest campaigns are intensifying and increasingly targeting recently released detainees, children and women. The arrests come amid escalation rates, the conversion of residential areas into interrogation sites, and continued pressure on communities across the territory. The Israeli occupying forces carry out near-daily incursions throughout the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, accompanied by arrests and the use of live ammunition, rubber bullets, and tear gas against Palestinian youth. For the second consecutive day, the Israeli authorities have also maintained the closure of all checkpoints leading out of Jericho, preventing Palestinian ID holders from leaving the city. Entry permits only through the DCO checkpoint, known as the Yellow Gate, with no exit allowed. Meanwhile, Al-Aqsa Mosque has remained closed since yesterday, with Israeli occupying authorities preventing worshippers from accessing the compound under what they describe as a state of emergency.
And at least 2 Palestinians were killed and several others wounded in a bombing by the Israeli occupying forces on the town of Jabalia in the northern Gaza Strip. The Palestinian news agency Wafa reported that the strike targeted the El Jun area in Jabalia el-Balad. According to the latest provisional figures from the Palestinian health authorities, the Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has killed at least 72,096 people and wounded 171,791 others since October 7, 2023. Since the ceasefire came into effect on October 10th, 629 Palestinians have been killed and 1,693 others wounded. And in Lebanon, 31 people have been killed in new Israeli airstrike targeting the capital Beirut and other southern regions. The health ministry stressed that 149 others were wounded in the raid. The Israeli occupying forces have continued their bombardments of Lebanon in violation of the ceasefire concluded in November 2024. The Sudanese army has succeeded in repelling the attack launched by the Rapid Support Paramilitary Forces (RSF) on Dalang, the second largest city in South Kordofan state in southern Sudan. Military sources reported that the RSF attacked Dalang, but the armed forces repelled them, inflicting losses and destroying or seizing several of their combat vehicles and equipment. On January 26, the Sudanese army announced the lifting of the siege of Dalang, the second largest city in South Kordofan, after 2 years of siege by the RSF and the allied Sudan People's Liberation Movement North. Since October 2025, the three states of the Kordofan region, northwest and south, have witnessed heavy clashes between the Sudanese army and the RSF. And the UN has said that dozens of civilians have been killed in renewed violence in the northern part of South Sudan, a country plagued by chronic instability, expressing alarm at the resurgence of violence. The United Nations mission in Sudan or in South Sudan, UNMISS, said in a statement that unidentified armed youth attacked the headquarters of the Abinom County near the border with Sudan, injuring around 20 people, and expressed concern over the reports of dozens of civilian and local official deaths during the clashes. The head of UNMISS, Anita Kikikbeho, urged all concerned parties to cease hostilities without delay and to engage in constructive dialogue to address their grievance. With this last piece of news, we come to the end of our news bulletin. Stay tuned to Radio Algeria International.
While the presence of Islam in West Africa dates back to the 8th century, the spread of the faith in regions that are now the modern states of Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Nigeria was in actuality a gradual and complex process. Much of what we know about the early history of West Africa comes from medieval accounts written by Arab and North African geographers and historians. Specialists have used several models to explain why Africans converted to Islam. Some emphasize economic motivations, others highlight the draw of Islam's spiritual message, and a number stress the prestige and influence of Arabic literacy in facilitating state building. Why the motivations of early conversions remain unclear, it is apparent that the early presence of Islam in West Africa was linked to trade and commerce with North Africa. Trade between West Africa and the Mediterranean predated Islam. However, North African Muslims intensified the trans-Saharan trade. North African traders were major actors in introducing Islam into West Africa. Several major trade routes connected Africa below the Sahara with the Mediterranean Middle East, such as Sili Massa to Oudarouste and Gadames to Gao. The Sahel, the ecological transition zone between the Sahara Desert and Far Zone, which spans the African continent, was an intense point of contact between North Africa and communities south of the Sahara. In West Africa, the three great medieval empires of Ghana, Mali, and the Songhai developed in Sahel. The history of Islam in West Africa can be explained in three stages: containment, mixing, and reform. In the first stage, African kings contained Muslim influence by segregating Muslim communities. In the second stage, African rulers blended Islam with local traditions as the population selectively appropriated Islamic practices. And finally, in the third stage, African Muslims pressed for reforms in an effort to rid their societies of mixed practices and implement Sharia. This three-phase framework helps shed light on the historical development of the medieval empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, and the 19th century conquests that led to the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate in Hausa-land and the Umarian state in Senegambia. This week we focus on the first stage, which is containment. The early presence of Islam was limited to segregated Muslim communities linked to the trans-Saharan trade. In the 11th century, Andalusian geographer al-Bakri reported accounts of Arab and North African Berber settlements in the region. Several factors led to the growth of the Muslim merchant scholar class in non-Muslim kingdoms. Islam facilitated long-distance trade by offering useful sets of tools for merchants, including contract law, credit, and information networks. Muslim merchant scholars also played an important role in non-Muslim kingdoms as advisors and scribes in Ghana. They had the crucial skill of written script, which helped in the administration of kingdoms. Many Muslims were also religious specialists whose amulets were prized by non-Muslims. Merchant scholars also played a large role in the spread of Islam into the forest zones. These included the Jahanke merchant scholars, the Jula merchants in Mali and the Ivory Coast, and the Hausa merchants during the 19th century in Nigeria, Ghana, and Guinea-Bissau. Muslim communities in the forest zones were minority communities often linked to trading diasporas. Many of the traditions in the forest zones still reflect the tradition of Al-Hajj Salim Suwari, a late 15th century Soninke scholar who focused on responsibilities of Muslims in a non-Muslim society. His tradition, known as the Suwarian tradition, discouraged proselytizing, believing that God would bring people around to Islam in his own ways. This tradition worked for centuries in the forest zone, including the present day, where they are vibrant Muslim minority communities. Although modern Ghana is unrelated to the ancient kingdom of Ghana, modern Ghana chose the name as a way of honoring early African history. The boundaries of the ancient kingdom encompassed the middle Niger Delta region, which consists of modern-day Mali and parts of present-day Mauritania and Senegal. This region has historically been home to the Soninken, Malinke, Wakuri, and Wangari peoples. Fulanis and the Southern Sahara Sanhaja Berbers also played a prominent role in the spread of Islam in the Niger Delta region. Large towns emerged in the Niger Delta region around 300 AD. Around the 8th century, Arab documents mentioned ancient Ghana and that Muslims crossed the Sahara into West Africa for trade. North African and Saharan merchants traded salt, horses, dates, and camels for the north with gold, timber, and foodstuff from regions south of the Sahara. Ghana kings, however, did not permit North African and Saharan merchants to stay overnight in the city. This gave rise to one of the major features of Ghana, the dual city. Ghana kings benefited from Muslim traders but kept them outside centers of power. From the 8th to the 13th century, contact between Muslims and Africans increased and Muslim states began to emerge in the Sahel. Eventually, African kings began to allow Muslims to integrate. Accounts during the 11th century reported a Muslim state called Takrur in the middle Senegal Valley. Around this time, Almoravid reform movement began in Western Africa and expanded throughout modern Mauritania, North Africa, and southern Spain. The Almoravids imposed a fundamentalist version of Islam in an attempt to purify beliefs and practices from syncretistic and heretical beliefs. The Almoravid movement imposed greater uniformity of practice in Islamic law among West African Muslims. The Almoravids captured trade routes and posts, leading to the weakening of the Takruri state. Over the next 100 years, the empire dissolved into a number of small kingdoms. You can join us next time for a fresh edition to tell you about the second phase of the history of Islam in West Africa, which is mixing.
The Rais Palace, also known as Bastion 23, which is located in the lower part of the old city of Algiers, or Kasbah, is an Algerian architectural jewel built during the Ottoman era in the 18th century, precisely in 1576 AD, by Deyramden Pasha. The palace, which consists of 3 palaces and 6 houses, was meant to strengthen and reinforce the defences and maritime protection of the city. The name of Bastion 23 was given to the palace following the construction of the ramparts during the then French colonial rule. Archaeologist Kahina Muhus gives us a glimpse of the history of Bastion 23.
Well, we can date back the order of construction of the Bastion 23 to 1576, when a defensive battery was commissioned by Mami Arnott to Ramatan Pasha. Its expansion was recorded from 1750. It was purchased by Qara Mustafa in 1797, then by Dey Mustafa a year later. Finally, in the 1800s, the palaces 23 and 17 were built.
The architecture of Bastion 23 is unique. The ceilings are made from cedar or cedar logs, which are resistant to damp and termites, and other wood-based ceilings decorated and carved with geometric and floral motifs in polychrome, as well as rigid ceilings in hallways, kitchens and bathrooms. The dining room is located in Palace 18, with windows overlooking the sea, niches on the walls lined with earthenware tiles, and a decorative shelf. This room also has niches for oil lamps. You can find Sqifa, which is a reception area separating the inside from the outside to maintain the privacy of the harem. The latter has 3 entrances, the first leading to the stable below, the second to a small room used as a fireplace, and the last opening onto the patio with slight benches. Archaeologist Kahina Mahuz has more on the fascinating architecture of Bastion 23.
The architecture of the Bastion 23 is really wealthy, and that back from the Roman era. We had